Hi, everyone. I'm Rich Harwood. Welcome to another edition of Harwood Half Hour. It's great to be with you right before the holidays. Before I get started, if you're joining us, flip me a message just so I know you can hear me and tell me where you're coming in from today. Last week, you may remember, I did an edition on getting past your fears. This is kind of the bookend. The other bookend to that session, which is, what are you for? How do you strike a personal covenant with yourself about what will ground you in the work that you do and guide your efforts moving forward? That's what I want to talk to you about today. And I'm hoping that today will lead to you creating your own personal covenant with yourself about what's important to you, what grounds you, and what you want to guide you in the work that you do moving forward. After the holidays, when we all get back from the holidays, from Christmas and New Year's and other things, one of my first Facebook Lives will be on my trip to Israel, which I'm taking in 2 days. I'll be there for about 8 days, meeting with different groups all across the country about how do you create a shared society in highly divisive times. And so the trip will be both about the possibilities of bringing our work to Israel and also what we can learn to bring back for our work here in the US, Canada, Australia, Kenya, and other places around the globe. So, personal covenant. Before I get started, a question for you. What would it mean for you to create a personal covenant, a deal with yourself about how you're going to bring yourself into this work? So as you listen today, shoot me your thoughts about that question. And so here we go. You know, we're approaching New Year's. We all make resolutions about what we want the next year to be. And as I was thinking about this edition of Facebook Live on personal covenants, I was thinking that, you know, so many of the New Year's resolutions that we make all are about improving something that's wrong with us, about what we need to change about ourselves moving into the new year, about some deficit we have. We don't exercise enough. We don't eat well enough. You know, we don't call our mothers enough, whatever it might be. Almost all New Year's resolutions that I know of, that I hear people talking about, always deal with our deficits. And now, as you move into 2019, and we think about this personal covenant, I'd like for you to strike a personal covenant, not about how you can change yourself, not about the deficits that you face in yourself, not about something that's wrong with you, but a personal covenant that actually allows you to live into the person you are, that you can actually become more of the person you're meant to be, the person that's already within inside of you, that sometimes may get lost, that where things might get caked over, where things get dismissed by others, but where you know in your heart of hearts, deep within yourself, there's this person that wants to come out, that wants to do what it needs to do, who wants to do what it needs to do. And this personal covenant is about articulating that, about claiming it, about making a deal with yourself, about who you're going to be as you move forward doing this work. So it grounds you, it propels you forward, but it doesn't focus on deficits and what's wrong, but actually celebrates who you are and helps you live into that, And I think that this personal covenant is so important today because our public life and politics have become more nasty, more acrimonious, more divisive, where people sort of push you off your game. We're told to work harder and just hit our metrics and hit our goals and don't worry about what really matters to you, about what really animates you, about the ideals that are within you that maybe motivated you to do this work in the first place. There are so many grievances being shouted out by different groups and different people. It seems like everyone has a grievance today, all of us. And in these grievances, things can become as important as they are, and as much as we need to address them, there can be a kind of negativity in our public life that often takes us farther and farther away from the things that we really value and really want to make sure we're pursuing in our work. And so in a moment, I'm going to lead you through how do you strike a personal covenant with yourself. But first, I want to tell you a few stories about people who have filled out these personal covenants that you probably downloaded before you joined this Facebook Live. That we sent out ahead of time, and if not, you can get one from our office. But a couple of stories about people who have filled out these personal covenants in the work that we've done with them. I remember a school board member in Houston who filled out one of these personal covenants, and he wrote it out after going to one of our labs. And he told me later on, after I saw him, he said, I took that personal covenant that I filled out and I folded it up and I put it in my wallet. And every now and then during a heated debate on the Houston School Board, I would pull out, even during the meetings, I would pull out this personal covenant that I had written to remind myself about what I'm for, to ground myself in what really matters to me, to remind myself about the ways in which I want to come into the world and do the work that's important to me. And so I vividly remember the day that he came up and told me that story about how he had folded up the personal covenant, put it in his wallet, put it in his jacket, pulled it back out, unfolded it during meetings to remind himself about what really matters to him. I remember someone else who worked for a national foundation. The foundation was going through lots of changes, a whole bunch of iterations of changes over many, many months. And he said to me that he had filled out not just one, but he'd come to our summits and been to our labs, and he had filled out a number of these personal covenants. But after filling one out, he always put it in his desk drawer. And he told me that one Christmas, actually, right before the holiday, when times were really difficult in this national foundation, when the changes kept happening and no one knew really which end was up, and people were kind of bewildered about what was happening. They were puzzled about what really mattered still in this foundation. He told me one Christmas, right before Christmas, he opened his drawer and he pulled out his personal covenant and he reread it to himself to remind himself about why was he really doing this work? What's really important to him? What really matters to him? What values really drive him? So that as, in a sense, the winds were blowing in different directions and he was moving with these winds, he didn't want to be swept away by them. He didn't want to be knocked over by them. He didn't want to just go with the winds, whichever way they were blowing at any given time. He wanted to be rooted, so that he wouldn't get knocked over or blown away or swept away in the mess that was happening in this national foundation. So he pulled it out, and it really helped him stay rooted and stay grounded about what really matters. And then I'm reminded of a story about an individual I know well, actually now, who told me that he and his neighbor would fill out these covenants every year. And every year they would meet to talk about the last year and how well they did in terms of fulfilling their covenant with themselves, and then look forward to what they would need to do moving forward in the next year, sort of where we are right now as we come upon a new year. They would talk about what do we need to do, what do I need to do next year to make a deal with myself, to stay grounded, to stay on the path I want to stay on, and to fulfill who I can be as I do this work. And so what I'd love to do is invite you now, not to tell stories about someone in Houston or some national foundation or someone I know who met with their next door neighbor, but now I just want to talk to you, just to you, about what does it mean for you to have a personal covenant with yourself about the ways in which you're going to work in this next year. And maybe how can you even fill one of these out and not do those silly New Year's resolutions about losing weight or exercising more or whatever it is, but actually how can you fill out a personal covenant so that you can actually live into the person you're supposed to be, that you can be more of the person you already are, that you can be a better version or a more complete or a more whole version of really who you are. And I think that's what it means to be alive. I think that's what it means to work in community life and public life, to make the world a better place. I think that's what it means to be part of something larger than ourselves. So these personal covenants, we have different versions. If you've been through our work with us, if you've been to a lab, there's one version which sort of takes off on some things that we do in the lab with you. If you've been through our Public Innovators Summit, our Harwood Summit every year, there's one. And so I'm going to use the most generic version of our personal covenant that the Institute has. We've used, we created this covenant. I created it, I think, probably about 28 years ago. And we've been using it ever since because people love it so much. And I hope you like it too. And so this is the most generic version, so you don't have to have been through our lab or gone to a Harwood Summit during the fall or anything else. You can just do this without knowing anything else about the Institute's work. And it can be meaningful to you and purposeful for you as you move forward in this next year. So here we go. There are 5 questions in this version that I'm going to cover. I'm going to go through each question. And as I do, I'm going to ask you some follow-ups just to prompt your thinking about it, to maybe talk a little about the question's meaning. And I hope either after this Facebook Live, or maybe even as we're going through it now, or if you're listening to it later on, that you can jot down notes to yourself in response to these 5 questions and work on them more afterwards. And I'll talk more about that at the end here. But here are the 5 questions. The first one is this. What inspires me to work in public life? Right? What inspires you to work in public life? And when I think about this question, I often talk about in labs, in the summit, and when I'm giving speeches, this notion that we each have this urge within us to do good. I believe it's innate. I believe we're born with it. I think it's just part of who we are as human beings, as being social beings, of wanting to be connected, as I said earlier, to something larger than ourselves. We all have this urge within. Now, as we get older, sometimes it gets kicked over, it gets dismissed, it gets denigrated by other people. But if you can close your eyes in thinking about this question, what inspires you to work in public life, and to think about what does inspire you, or another way to think about it, what's my urge within? What's animating me to come into public life and do the types of things that I'm doing? And so that's the first question. What inspires me to do this work in public life? So what inspires you to do the work you do in public life? The second question, what are the values that shape the way I act in public life? What are the values? What are the values that drive you, that shape you, that animate you to do what you do in public life? I think this question is so important because it's one thing to know what inspires you. It's an additional thing, a deeper thing, to know what values shape what you do and why you do it. What's really important to you? What values are really important to you? For some of us, it might be a value of fairness. For others, it might be the value of opportunity for all. For others, it might be helping to create a more equitable society, a more inclusive society. For others, it might be excellence. For me, I know the value that's really important to me is integrity, right? That everything I do has to have integrity. And so what are the values that really shape how you act in public life? And the reason for that is that when you fill out this covenant and you make this deal with yourself, you're going to want to live by those values. You're going to want to make sure that they're present, not just once a year or twice a year, not even just once a day. You're going to want to make sure that you live by those values, that these values help you live and help guide you in what you do, in all that you do, in every part of your life. So the first question is, what inspires you to do this work in public life? The second question is, what are the values that shape the work that you do in public life? Notice I didn't say what are the values you want to shape you. These are the values that are already within you that you want to shape what you do in public life. that you want to bring out more. Third, one of my favorite questions is, what does it mean for me to step forward? What does it mean for me to step forward? So what inspires me? What are the values that shape what I do? And now, what does it mean for me to step forward? And I often think about this question. I talked a little bit about this last week in getting over one's fears. What does it mean to make yourself visible? What does it mean for you to really step forward and say, here I am, I'm ready, I'm present, I'm accounting for myself in a way. I want to do this. I need to step forward to do this. Now, there are all sorts of things that can prevent us from stepping forward. Fear, a fear of failure, a fear of acceptance, a belief that we need to be all things to all people. There's a whole range of things, a fear that I'm not going to succeed, that I'm going to fail, a fear that I'm not going to be able to raise enough money to do what I've set out to do, a fear that someone's going to laugh at me, whatever it may be. There are all sorts of things that stand in our way of stepping forward to do what we need to do. So for you, just for you, not for your sibling, not for your parents, not for your teachers, not for anyone, your boss, I don't care about any of those people. The only person I care about right now is you. So for you, what does it mean for you to step forward? What does it really mean for you to step forward? That's a really important question, because otherwise this can be an academic exercise. We can talk about what inspires us. We can talk about what values we want to shape what we do. But we need to step forward. We need to make ourselves present. We need to be visible. We need to account for ourselves. So what does it mean for you to step forward in order to actually act on what inspires you and to make the values that shape what you do real every day? Fourth question, what am I struggling with now that I need to keep in mind as I move forward? And you may need to think about this a little bit more, but as you go through this, as you strike this personal covenant with yourself, I think it's important to recognize that we all struggle with stuff. There's not anyone who doesn't struggle with things. The most successful people in the world struggle with things when they're alone or in front of big crowds or whatever it may be. We all have struggles. We all have struggles with stepping forward. We all have struggles with acting on the values that shape what we want to do in public life. We all have struggles in trying to figure out how we're going to fulfill what really inspires us to do this work. So what are you struggling with that might get in the way of doing what you need to do, or that might get in the way of you really acting on these values that are really important to you, or that might prevent you from actually acting on what inspires you to do this work? What are you struggling with? And I think, I talked again about this in a different way last week about getting over your fears. It's really important to name the things, in this case, that we struggle with. Without naming them, they can sit within us and gnaw at us and pull us down and hold us back. And without fully naming them, they're never fully visible to us. They don't fully exist. And when we name them, two things happen. One, we're no longer afraid of them as much as we once were, because they're no longer gnawing at us in the same way. And second, when we name them, we can begin to act on them. We can begin to pinpoint what we need to do. And so I really encourage you to spend some time with this question, because it's really, really important to know what we're struggling with, what might hold us back, in order that we can move forward. And that's really critical. And then last, when you do this, after you go through these first four questions, here's the fifth question. What three things need to guide what I say and do? What three things need to guide what I say and do? And there's a trick to this question. Number one, it focuses only on three things. So I'm asking you to really zero in on three things, three critical things that need to occur, that need to guide what you say and do moving forward. What are those three things? If you could only name three things, not, we often do these things, these exercises, and we come up with laundry lists of, here are all the things I need to do in order to move forward. And God bless those exercises. But the fact is that when you have a laundry list of things, you seldom can hold all of them simultaneously. You seldom can really focus, and you seldom can really achieve them. But if we can really just zero in on three things, we can all remember three things that need to guide and say what each of us need to do in order to move forward. And so I'd encourage you to do that. Think about these three things, write them down, and practice them, use them. So this personal covenant, we're coming up on the new year. We're all making New Year's resolutions. And here's what I'd like you to think about. Not how do I think about what's wrong with me or all my deficits or all the things I need to improve, but more I'd like to invite you to think about how do I articulate what I already know is really important to me, but sometimes may get lost, that sometimes may get caked over in all the activities that I do, that you do every day, that sometimes people are pushing and pulling on me, and so they get discarded or denigrated or left behind. I forget them sometimes. But these are things that are already within you. They are who you are. And how can you articulate those things on a piece of paper and write them down and have them for yourself? And how can you do it in such a way that it's not about fixing something it's not about declaring what's wrong within you, it's not about some deficit in you. It's about making the choice to live into yourself more. It's about making the choice to lean into your life more. It's about becoming more of who you already are, the person you already value, the person you know you want to exist in this world to help make the world a better place. So I encourage you to fill out this personal covenant. I encourage you to keep it. I encourage you to pull it out every so often. I think we should pull it out every few weeks, at most once a month, at least once a month, to remind ourselves about what we value, what grounds us, and who we want to be in this world. And I can't think of a more important time than right now to do this, when we're experiencing so much divisiveness and acrimony in our public and community lives, when we're pushed to excel and to achieve and to create impact in our work, when there is so much noise around us. I think we should take the time. I'm urging you to take the time, just 20 minutes, to fill out this personal covenant so you can pierce through the noise, remember who you are, ground yourself in what matters to you, and have a deal with yourself about how you're going to lean into your life in the coming months in 2019. And I can tell you from 30 years of experience now, that the more you fill out this personal covenant, the more you use it, the more you make it real in your daily life, the more effective you will be, the more impactful you will be, the more authentic you will be, and lastly, the more joyful you will be in your life. So thanks for joining me today. It's another edition of Harwood Half Hour. Every Thursday, 4 p.m., we'll be coming to you. Just remember, you can see the sign behind me. This is our 30th anniversary. We're really excited about it. We're really working hard to figure out more ways to spread our work, to make it more accessible to everyone, and to find ways to support you in the work that you do. Our work is rooted in a philosophy of civic faith and the practice of turning outward. And as you've probably heard me say before, our work has spread to all 50 states in the US and has been pulled into about 40 countries worldwide. And so as we approach Christmas and the New Year and all sorts of other holidays, I want to wish you a happy holiday, a great New Year, and I look forward to being in touch in 2019, and be well. Thanks so much for joining us.